Night is the time when the soul surrenders. No one makes the voyage through the dark alone. When mortals sink into the seas of sleep, they are caught at once in nets of dreams. The dark sets free 1,000 creatures, feline, serpentine, half-bodied, disembodied, that roam everywhere, upstairs and downstairs, and in the sleeper's chamber. Endowed with a shadow life of their own, these beings care nothing for order and reason or sense. They make a baffling dream world where time moves backward, and walls melt at a glance, where beasts can talk, and stranger things than beasts can walk. It is a world that humankind long sought to comprehend. In earlier days, people said that dreams were messages from the gods or envoys from the realm beyond the grave. Learned men studied them, and as you're about to hear, they saw clear connections between dreaming magic and the waking future. Howdy campers, and welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad. We are a podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, and minors in retro video games, tabletop RPGs, pre-internet mysteries, and raising our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. I'm your handsome camp counselor, Woody Brown, and this is your kind of goofy-looking camp counselor,
Screech. Tyler Bence.
Oh, man. What's up, brother?
You know, just hanging out. Just hanging around.
Just hanging around. Oh, God. I love how, like, the internet has created these memes that now, like, my kids will say that.
Yeah. Well,
like,
you
me, nothing. Just hanging around.
You let your kids be on, like, TikTok and
No.
YouTube for years now.
No.
Yeah.
No, but, dude, I saw Tim Dillon in Nashville. You know, there's a Asheville, North Carolina, but we were in Nashville a couple weeks ago, and I saw Tim Dillon, and he has this hilarious joke that he talked about TikTok, and he was talking about how, like, everybody wants to ban it. He's like, no way, dude. I hope that some Chinese national has to watch and go through every hour of footage of these idiots dancing around because he just thinks that's, like, the ultimate torture, which is pretty funny. Now,
I mean, that is true also.
we're not talking about TikTok today, man.
No, we're not.
We're extending, kind of spinning off of this idea of this being the summer of the Shadow Man.
Yes, sir.
And today, we're talking about sleep paralysis.
Yeah, it's sort of like a subcategory.
Right. You know, it was one of those things that you kind of can't really, you cannot talk about Shadow Man encounters and stuff without, inadvertently talking about sleep paralysis.
Yeah, they definitely are one and the same. But like I said the last episode, as someone who has had both of those things on two separate occasions, my personal opinion is that they are completely different, but there is a lot of overlap.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So,
and it's kind of like, I don't remember what it is. It's sort of like, you know, that's it. It's like a square. What is it now? Dang. A square is a parallelogram, but not every parallelogram is a square. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, right. Yeah.
As we'll see, as we dive deeper and talk about and define what sleep paralysis really is and all the different things that are happening and all the different kind of stories and encounters that people have had, there's going to be some overlap with Shadow Man. There's going to be some other stuff, but it is interesting because I think you can have a Shadow Man experience without necessarily having the sleep paralysis, and vice versa.
Right. And I will say this. While I think they're two separate things, I do think that it could be possible that people are experiencing experiencing both of those things at the same time.
Yeah.
You know.
what really kind of excited me about it in general was like, as I was starting to do research about it, obviously there's just sort of, I knew the general sort of idea of what it is, but I started diving into the science behind what's going on, dude. And it's just crazy. And we'll get into it. So first, let me just explain this. Very simply put, sleep paralysis is a state during waking up or falling asleep where a person is aware but unable to move or speak. It's often accompanied by hallucinations and a sensation of pressure on the chest, which, of course, can be terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, already just thinking about that, again, as someone who hasn't experienced that part of this, I can't even imagine what that must be like.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if... So, I don't know. I mean, memory is obviously like very fallible. And so during like the research into this stuff and this season of Camp Rad Strangeness, I've tried for the life of me to sort of go back and try to remember if I felt like the super heavy weight. And I don't know if it's actually like a heavy weight on your chest or if it's just that feeling that like you can't move. And it's like the lines are kind of blurred a little bit.
It's almost like maybe they're talking about if you're trying to sit up, it feels like something.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, can I say something real quick? This is barely on topic
safe
here.
Space. Yeah.
This idea of like weighted blankets and stuff. Now, I know that is beneficial for some folks, but for me, terrifying. I'm not into it. Get out of here.
I've wanted to try one, actually.
No. I don't know. I would feel like, first off, I got to be able to like at least put one leg out. I got to regulate temperature.
I mean, it's not a weighted sleeping bag. I think you can stick
Yeah, but
out.
you're in the middle of the night and you feel like, is it an incubus on your chest? Is it your stupid blanket that you purchased? I mean, it's just, okay.
Which, by the way, real quick, I think maybe the perfect visual for this particular sort of subset of shadow people and shadow man is that famous painting, The Nightmare.
Well, you're kind of jumping the gun. We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
But yes, you're right. And it's probably what everybody visualizes in their head, whether they know it or not, honestly. Because it's like, yeah, I took art history in college, but I don't remember that painting until someone says, it's just when I'm thinking of something on somebody's chest, I'm thinking of that,
Also, I'm not super impressed by this now just because, kind of been into it in the game a while. But I will say, like in the earlier days, I was always so impressed with these paintings or these accounts being so far back in time. Like, it's like, wow, these people were like sort of privy to this thing, hundreds of years before, people are talking about it on Reddit.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like we mentioned last week, I mean, the word nightmare that everyone uses, if you know that you've used all your life, literally comes from talking about this phenomenon exactly.
Right.
Yep.
It's
just wild. All right. I want to break into the science here because it's so fascinating to me, and I'm a dork, and I like the scientific explanation of things. Now, before we do, though, again, we're going into this as not a way to explain away people having shadow man encounters or just sleep paralysis in general. But there is, a scientific sort of explanation, and a lot of it has to do with just our normal human physiology. So first we got to talk about REM, sleep, and paralysis.
Wait, real quick. Was my explanation not enough last week?
What do you mean? What are you talking about?
Basically, sleep paralysis. There's a chemical, and then you can't wake up.
I just want to say, no. All right. So during REM, not the 90s band from Athens, Georgia, who is amazing, but
classic.
Rapid eye movement sleep, our brain signals the body to relax and become immobile, essentially to prevent us from acting out our dreams. This state it's called muscle atonia. And it happens to everybody, and that's normal. And it's really interesting if you think about it. It's like, oh, yeah. I mean, in my dreams, I'm beating somebody up. Sometimes, You wake up, you're like, oh man, I punched the pillow, thank goodness, or whatever. So I'm going to just bear with me, folks. This is like 3 sentences of actual, this comes from the National Library.
There it is.
National Library of Medicine. All right, and so it's going to get a little granular, but I promise it's like 2 or 3 sentences. Muscle atonia occurs when motor neurons are not generating these things called action potentials. And this happens during the tonic periods of REM sleep. Motor neuron action potentials arise at the initial segment of the cell's axon, close to its soma, and result from a summation of currents that are generated at synapses on the soma and dendrites. If the voltage produced by these currents is above a certain threshold, then an action potential is triggered. It's almost like, and that's it. Did you guys survive the science?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's almost as if we have like an internal meter, okay? And once it, gets above a certain threshold, your brain and your body knows, oh, this is time to actually move because, this person's actually awake. If it's below that, then it's like, oh, they're just in a restful state. We don't need to move the body. Isn't that weird that that's what's going on? It's like,
yeah,
there is something that's like actively keeping you from, if you're chasing
wilding out.
Yeah, wilding out.
Yeah,
in your bed there.
It's almost like some like newer cars, like there's like a speed governor. It's almost like that in a way.
Yeah,
where it's like once you get to a certain speed, it's like nope.
Yeah. It's like a golf cart. What's fun is whenever you figure out how to take that puppy off, and you just take that thing to increase that threshold. Okay. Now, sleep paralysis occurs when the brain wakes up, like I said, from REM sleep, but the body's muscle atonia persists. So this results in a temporary inability to move or speak, and often while the mind is fully conscious. So it's like you're getting all these electrical signals, and for whatever reason, people that suffer from this, and we'll talk about those reasons in just a second, people that suffer from this, it's like that mechanism isn't working correctly. And so they're awake, but their body's still below that threshold, or it's just not working, and you're aware, but you can't move yet.
Well, I thought it was like basically a chemical that kind of floods your system, and something about like when you experience sleep paralysis, it's because that chemical is kind of like still going through your system, but your sort of waking mind is, awakened.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see anything about a chemical, more just like it's those electrical signals that are kind of triggering this this thing here.
That's really interesting. Those scientists are liars.
So typically, sleep paralysis episodes last from anywhere from a few seconds to, a couple minutes. It's actually not uncommon for people to experience it once or twice in their life, but for some, it can be a more frequent occurrence.
Yeah, it is kind of creepy. I mean, in doing the research, it is kind of wild when... and I completely look at this as like some sort of physiology trait in these people. I don't think it's I think it's totally like a scientific reason behind it, but it is weird like when you run across these accounts and these people are like, yeah, I have it several times a week, and it's like, dude, that sucks.
Dude, for sure. And I don't know if we can say just yet definitively that every single time it's because someone has like that mechanism's broken. They might be being visited by something nefarious. Now, for whatever reason, dude, I cannot get this idea of like the weight pressing down on your chest like out of my head. I mean, speaking of feeling weighed down, that's exactly how stress can feel in our everyday lives. And folks, that's why I am so glad that Tyra and I both have Magic Mind to help lift that weight off our shoulders. I mean, in all seriousness, man, the weight of the world. We live in a crazy time. There's so much going on that a lot of that can just weigh you down. It can just kind of cloud your mind with so much that you can't focus. Magic Mind, however, it's a mental performance shot. We've added it to our daily routine. It's packed with amazing ingredients like ashwagandha, which I don't know if you can get that at Kroger. And by the way, ashwagandha has been used for thousands of years in traditional medicine for its health benefits.
Yep, it helps to regulate stress for sure.
And another star ingredient is turmeric. And it's known for its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. Dude, listen to this. In ancient India, turmeric was used as a symbol of purity and applied to the skin for ceremonial purposes. I wonder if they did this every time they saw the shadow man. I'm just saying.
Maybe.
And we can't forget lion's mane. It's an edible mushroom that looks like, well, a lion's mane.
And I hate mushrooms, so this is the only way
true.
that I'm going to eat a mushroom.
Now, if they had onions in here, we'd be all set.
Well, if we had onions in this thing, we would have a different sponsor.
Well, true. Lion's mane is a superfood packed, again, with antioxidants and has been studied for its potential to support nerve function and treat conditions like anxiety and depression. Like we said before, Magic Mind isn't just another coffee replacement. It complements your morning routine, and it's the real deal. They are our title sponsor this year for Camp Rad Strangeness, and you can grab your own Magic Mind with our exclusive offer up to 48% off of your first subscription or 20% off of a one-time purchase using the code That Would Be Rad and then the number 20 at checkout. Just head on over to magicmind.com/thatwouldberad. All right, man. We talked about the physiological kind of scientific stuff, and we're going to talk a little more, still sprinkled in here will be some physiology, but I want to talk about like the psychological implications.
Okay, good.
So the immobility that these folks are suffering because, again, that mechanism is malfunctioning for some reason, coupled with the awareness of one's surroundings. It's dark. It's at night. You can't move. Obviously, all this starts to cause this intense fear. This is often exacerbated by hallucinations, which are really common during sleep paralysis. You know, again, your body's paralyzed, but your mind's awake, and there's this dissonance that's created that's, got to be unsettling. Listeners, now Tyler doesn't have to imagine this because he's basically experienced it, but imagine waking up and realizing you can't move a muscle no matter how hard you try. You're fully aware of this room, your bed, everything around you, but you're trapped in your body that refuses to obey. It's like being locked inside of yourself. I can't even imagine that at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like, it's sort of, I don't know. That I wouldn't say it's my greatest fear, but like that would be pretty close. Like not being able to move,
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I mean, in a joking way, it's like that episode or that sketch in I Think You Should Leave when the dad like puts on the virtual reality thing. He's like, like going crazy.
Yeah.
And then they're like, what happened? He's like, I don't know how to work the body. It's like, it's that kind of thing where your mind, and she's like, okay, well, come back to the thing. He's like, I can't walk. And she's like, really? And he's like, yeah.
God, I don't know what, man, there is something about that guy that just, I just look at him and it makes me laugh.
Yeah, dude, he's hilarious.
Honestly, I would say to me, that's like maybe the scariest part about it is that almost like claustrophobic feeling. It's kind of like, and there's been like a few of these, but like the movies where I think in Kill Bill 2, where you're like sort of buried alive.
Oh, gosh.
I feel like it's very sort of akin to that.
I didn't want to think about that because that is on the list of top fears. I don't like listing my fears on the show.
Let's get vulnerable today.
All right. So there's really 3 common types of hallucinations that people experience. The first one, and it's the most common, is the intruder hallucination. People often report sensing like this evil presence in the room, not just a vague feeling either, but literally physically sensing someone or something watching you. Now, this is the one that I would attribute or at least kind of tie to the shadow man in general, right? This intruder is in your room. And it's funny too, because my imagination, and yours too, Tyler, and listeners, I'm sure a lot of you have a very vivid imagination. When I wake up in the middle of the night and I've had like a weird dream or something, I basically I'm looking around the room, I don't know if you've seen this internet video either, but It's like this girl, and she's got this like pile of clothes in her room, and she's like, okay, well, I'll just put the clothes there, and she like turns off the light, and it's just like a person's like standing there. You know, it's like a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, that totally used to happen to me when I was a kid, you know? So imagine again, you can't move, and then your mind's playing tricks on you, you know? All right. The second one is, of course, the Incubus hallucination. Named after the mythological incubus, a demon that is believed to sit on a person's chest while they sleep, suffocating them. People describe an overwhelming weight on their chest. They can't breathe, combining that with the inability to move or call for help. And this is just a recipe for just absolute terror in my book. The third, and this is where, well, you'll see. The third is called Vestibular-Motor Hallucination. This is where people experience sensations of movement, like flying or falling. Your body might feel like it's being lifted, dropped, or even floating out of bed. Now, I have definitely had this before. I guess I've experienced sleep paralysis too, pal.
Get in there.
You know? And then, one time we decided while Boo Boo was sleeping to just slam on the brakes, and we kind of forced a vestibular-motor hallucination on him. And that was hilarious because he like held out all his hands and feet at the same time. It's like, oh, and it was incredible. Some researchers, just in general, think that these hallucinations are linked to these disruptions in the brain's spatial and motor systems. Kind of like, again, linking it back to these electrical signals sort of misfiring, which creates this sense of movement when there is none. Some people, report feeling like they're spinning or floating or being pulled. I mean, again, it doesn't happen to me like all the time, but sometimes if I nod off or something, like while I'm watching something on TV with my wife at night, I'll like, whoa, feel like I'm falling. And it sucks, but at the same time, it's kind of like, it is kind of fun because you're like, whoa, that's so weird. It felt like I was literally falling from the sky.
So have you read anything that ties it to like naps versus like actual sleep?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, pal.
Oh, okay.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
There's something out there waiting for us. And it ain't no dead.
Hey, this is Bryce Johnson from the Bigfoot Collectors Club, and you're listening to Tyler and Woody on That Would Be Rad, because that is rad.
Let's first talk about like how rare is this, okay? And we'll talk about kind of like what some of the risk factors are in terms of increasing your likelihood that this is going to happen to you. So it's actually not as rare as you might think, which is surprising to me. And I don't know, the unfortunate part of that is that I don't know if that's because of the little like, oh, I'm falling hallucination potentially being counted as, because to me it's like, I want to know if everybody's having the incubus and the intruder. Okay. But studies suggest...
Well, wait a minute. You're saying the intruder is more the feeling of the presence?
Yeah, like feeling or sensing someone or seeing someone watching you. That's one hallucination.
And then
the incubus is somebody sitting on your chest.
Yeah, like the Old Hag.
Yeah. And then the vestibular-motor hallucination is the one where you feel like you're falling. And to me, I feel like that one's probably the most common. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So anyway.
There's also the, which you and I have talked about before, the exploding head syndrome.
I mean, I vaguely remember you talking about that. I may have spaced out though.
It's like just as you're falling asleep, sometimes like in your mind, it sounds like a crazy loud noise, and it like wakes you up.
I've definitely never experienced that, but I do remember you talking about that. Yeah, what? Like you experience that all the time?
Yeah, I actually do kind of, especially as I've gotten older, like in my late 30s here recently, I would say, I don't know.
Like a loud noise? I mean, maybe it's just you snoring.
I don't snore though. I mean, I do when I'm like really sick. And what's funny is I don't even know that it is like an actual loud noise like in your head or whatever, but it just gives like the sensation that like there's like been like a huge bang or something. And so you kind of like
Oh, okay. Yeah,
wake
yeah.
up,
I've
freaks
done
you
that
out.
before. It's just like a loud bam, and you're like, huh.
Yeah.
But there's nothing there. Dude, that's the worst in the middle of the night because then that's when my adrenaline goes from 0 to
Yeah.
a million because I'm like, something was loud enough.
Yeah.
Okay, I get you.
But then you start thinking like, was it
There's an
something?
intruder.
Like, did something make it? Like, what would have even made a noise beside my head?
Bad guy. Ninjas. I mean, like, dude, I could list them. And I do when I wake up. I'm like, there's a ninja assassin, and he's here to kill me.
I will say this.
I've trained for this day my whole life.
You and I both do, we've talked about this, where if somebody like stands over you or goes to like wake you up, we just immediately just like freak out and start punch in the air.
I thought you were going to say if I hear a noise, I just go to the window. Dude,
Oh, yeah, that.
if someone rings my doorbell and it's, 1 in the afternoon, I'm on high alert already, So, interestingly enough,
Sorry.
studies suggest that about 8% of the general population will experience sleep paralysis at some point in their lives. That's nearly 1 in 10 people. Okay, now this is where we get into, hey man, who's experiencing this more than the average?
Okay.
So among specific groups such as students or individuals with psychiatric conditions, the prevalence can be significantly higher. For example, of course, students often have irregular sleep patterns due to studying late or partying, which can actually trigger these episodes. And for those with psychiatric conditions, sleep paralysis might be a more frequent occurrence as well because their sleep patterns may or may not be affected based on, whatever their condition is. So those days we were sleep deprived because we were out late touring with the band,
Oh, yeah.
or once again, I get to get on my high horse here. I think we might be able to argue that your, relatively speaking, higher frequency of seeing weird stuff compared to mine is definitely because I go to bed early.
Yeah, well,
I'm just saying, dude.
well, because the majority of the time you're asleep, it's still daylight.
And that's not true.
So,
But, like,
well, one thing though, I will say, us as, longtime like touring musicians, you and I would both experience that weird thing where if we were like really tired and it was getting like real late, like, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning,
Yeah.
You start seeing like, just outside of like the beams of your headlights,
dude.
the sort of shadowy kind of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thought I saw a dinosaur. I mean, just weird stuff, dude. I'm not joking. And so people with irregular sleep schedules, Tyler, those who suffer from sleep deprivation, or individuals with other sleep disorders like narcolepsy are actually more prone to it.
my cousin Cole has that.
Well, if you have narcolepsy, you have like this fragmented sleep, which just sucks, man.
Yeah.
It's like it's the one thing that we all just get to do every day, and you're going to mess with that too?
Wait, didn't you say doesn't your brother?
No. He just drinks too much coffee and works his butt off. And so
I swear I
he doesn't
thought
have
you were talking-
narcolepsy, but he might, kind of do what my dad does, which is the grandfather in the Simpsons style,
Yeah.
just like fall asleep mid-sentence.
Yeah, my cousin Cole literally has done that since his like early 20s.
Man,
He would just come over and hang out and like we'd be watching a movie or something and he could just fall asleep. Like,
but it's like these guys that work outside a lot and work their butts off. I mean, they get tired, man.
yeah,
Also, people with, of course, like PTSD
yeah,
will be more likely to have this. I mean, here's what sucks, dude. It's like, it's this vicious cycle. Anxiety leads to poor sleep, which leads to sleep paralysis, which then leads to more anxiety,
yeah, that's true.
Yep.
Yep.
And it's like, man, I hope our kids don't ever get this. Just go to bed.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it really is like a great illustration of just how like sort of interconnected our minds and bodies really are.
Oh yeah, it's also
And so
like,
that's why I take no, I'm kidding, dude.
this episode brought to you by Magic Mind. No, it is kind of sad that like that's one of those things that you know that you can't like protect your kids from.
Mm-hmm.
You know that they're probably going to experience something like this.
Yeah. Unless you get them to bed at a decent hour and give them a regular, sleep schedule.
Well, it's
Moving
summer,
on. So,
by the way, guys, Woody was putting his kids to bed the other day
at 8 p.m.
4 p.m.
No. And by putting them to bed, I just mean like we do our nightly routine.
Mm-hmm.
They're in their beds. We give them their hugs and all that. And then they're reading and stuff. They're not going straight to bed at 8 o'clock.
Well,
I mean, Jane sometimes falls asleep pretty quickly, but Woodrow's, reading all the Harry Potter books and he'll stay up late. Now I kind of want to get into like...
Wait, real quick. You said that you were going to get into it. Do you get into like a more sort of scientific reason behind like the like presence?
No,
Well,
because there's no real scientific measurement about that other than just the combination of those things sort of misfiring, that mechanism malfunctioning, and then also hallucinations being caused. But, you can't really measure a hallucination.
well, I was really hoping that there would be some sort of...
There were some sleep studies, and I went into this. I mean, honestly, I dove in kind of deep into this. It was like sleep medicine clinic or whatever website where there was a study. It started getting real in the weeds with all that. But they do
think I ran
measure
across the same
the way
one.
that they found out and figured out all this stuff about, what happens during REM. Why are people experiencing even just not just sleep paralysis, but other variations? And they're able to sort of measure the signals and stuff. And so they've kind of like been able to narrow it down, dude. So they do have it sort of, I guess, specific to knowing exactly what that little threshold is. Of course, it varies person to person, but it's pretty interesting. But no, I didn't dive into anything that shows like, what Dreamscape, that kind of stuff where they're doing the full dream study, and then they can measure like, oh man, he must be having a hallucination. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All that.
Well, it's just I'm so interested in that aspect of the sleep paralysis. I mean that and then the the attic fan humming, buzzing kind of like thing, which is so prevalent also in like
Abduction.
like alien abductions and
dude.
stuff. Yeah,
And the time travel stuff, stories and stuff. I mean, all kinds of stuff. Now, I will say, you reminded me, I'm glad you did, of this documentary that I found on YouTube about sleep paralysis. And I'll try to find it and put the link in the show notes and then maybe on Instagram or something. But because it's really, well, now I'm going to say this and it's kind of insulting. Like the guy, I'll say this. Here's what's interesting. The guy that created this documentary is just a normal dude. He's not a journalist. He's not he's not even like as good as the worst YouTuber, okay? He's the guy that this kept on happening to, and then he picked up a camera and went around the world and started like interviewing people and cultures and all this to find out more about it for his own benefit, okay? So it's really intriguing. But I don't remember if it was that one or a different one. There's two that I watched. One of them had video footage, dude. They go and this guy who basically wakes up in the middle of the night and just like rips out of bed and just starts like punching stuff and going crazy, okay? They filmed him, dude. And no joke, this is something that you would not be able to fake, okay? It's video footage of this dude. He's been sleeping for hours. And then out of nowhere, no other body part moves to indicate, oh, he's waking up and now he's going to like put on a show for us. Nothing. All of a sudden, dude, I mean, even his head doesn't move. His eyes just open wide. And then and then they get wider, like he's like seeing something scary.
Wow.
And then his mouth opens, and then he's just like stuck like that for a while, and then he just like falls back asleep. He didn't even remember it happening, dude. And they showed him the footage, and he's just like, oh my gosh, man. I mean, crazy stuff, dude.
I mean, that is the one thing that, we can throw as many like scientific papers at it and say that we have it figured out, but just sleep in general and all of its weird sort of surrounding, just weird high strangeness almost, really. Like I sleptwalk as a kid like a ton, and then like my daughter Amelia, she still sleepwalks like all the time, and it's super weird because like she'll come in the room, and that's what's weird. There's like eyes are open. She's able to communicate, but there's this sort of like faraway look in her eyes. It's so bizarre,
So
but like,
weird.
yeah. But every time it happens, like if she walks into like my bedroom, my wife and I'll like look at each other and be like, I think she's asleep, because you'll ask her a question and then she'll just respond with like just like gibberish.
We're just wrestling.
No, but she'll be like, you'll be like, hey baby, are you sleepwalking? And she'll be like, no, I don't know. The door was open, and it's like, what? And it's like, oh, she's
Nonsensical words and stuff.
Yeah,
what's scary, dude, is like these situations. I know we're talking about sleep paralysis, but it is almost like the same thing in a way that like you're not. It's almost like opposite. Like you're awake, your body's moving and stuff, but for some reason things aren't working correctly.
Right.
But the scary thing about sleepwalking and stuff are these accounts where people will just like leave. Mm-hmm. They'll leave the house. They'll go, and all of a sudden they just like wake up and they're, huh?
Yeah.
That's the stuff that's scary, man.
Dude, there was a story that I read where
It's wrestling.
exact same thing happened. And this dude ended up getting in his car and he drove like, something crazy, like 12 miles to like his in-laws' house, and then like drove through the front of the house.
Yeah, see, dude, because
Something
imagine
crazy.
like his version of what he's seeing is still like dream world, and he's just like, heck yeah, this is a cool road. He just drives through a house.
Yeah, dude, it's and I think it's been in the 2000s, but there was like an actual like murder case where the dude was able to get off.
Wasn't like the Olympian guy? Didn't he like claim that he was like sleepwalking or something? I forget. He's like South African and he had like prosthetic legs and stuff.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, he murdered his girlfriend, dude.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
Stabbed her to death.
Another thing, well, before we get back, there's the other thing where I watched the show where like basically this lady has to put like padlocks on her cabinet because she was just like eating, like she would just like sit there, and she had like camera set up and stuff. She would just like sit there and just like eat like a whole bag of like marshmallows. I said that weird.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, what is she eating? Oh man,
I had a stroke there for a second. But she'll just eat like a whole bag of like chocolate chips or marshmallows.
Yeah, well, and maybe that's where my weight gain's coming from. Sleep.
Seriously, no. This lady had like a real issue where like she couldn't control her weight, and she realized that like she would get up in the morning and be like, why are all these like pots and pans out? Because she would get up and like pull out pots and like cook like a full meal.
Yeah, it's just hard for me. Sometimes it's hard for me to believe that stuff because I've never experienced anything like it, you know? And so that's an unfair assumption on my part, but that's just wild, man. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Although, if you see like the footage, because I was the same way. I was sort of like, I don't know, this just seems like, this seems like a real convenient, reason for just chugging away.
What's interesting, man, just like a lot of the stuff that we talk about, sleep paralysis has been a part of the human experience for centuries. And we know that because of documented cases and folklore throughout the world. So here in the U.S., a common one is called the Old Hag. In American folklore, particularly among those with like European ancestry, sleep paralysis is often explained as an attack by this old hag. This sinister figure is believed to sit on the chest of the sleeper, of course, and, renders them immobile or breathless. It reminds me of, I don't know, like different sort of depictions of the old hag kind of describe her differently, but to me, the scariest is when they kind of intermix almost like an earthy sort of like, I don't know what I'm picturing in my head, but I remember seeing something once where it was like this old witch lady, and she's just like soaking wet. Like she just came out of a lake, and she's got like tree leaves on her and stuff, and she's just like sitting. Yeah. And that's just terrifying, man.
Almost like an elemental type kind of thing.
In Japan, and we mentioned some of these last week, but in Japan, there's the Kanashibari. And it translates to bound or fastened in metal. And typically it's believed to be caused by vengeful spirits, often those who have died with unresolved grudges. So that's an interesting sort of twist to it. And of course, leave it to the Japanese to make it even more terrifying by including, like, you know, metal and like vengeance and that kind of thing.
Yeah, what is it? That's such an odd...
One of the common ones I've read about were like, you know, well, it actually kind of reminds me of the Wolverine sort of Japanese arc in the comics where he kind of falls in love with this girl. She gets murdered. It's that kind of thing. You know, there's like the vengeful spirit in Japan who, like, maybe the baby was killed or the wife was killed because the husband had a mistress, and she comes back and haunts the husband and the mistress and that kind of thing. That's what the Kanashibari is.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. I mean, the Japanese do love that like vengeance, revenge tale kind of thing, which I mean, we do too. So.
Oh, yeah, man. God, that's my favorite kind of story, man. I mean, Punisher. Now, that documentary that I mentioned earlier, where it's just that guy and he goes around the world, he actually goes to Africa, and in Nigeria, they call it the devil on your back.
Oh, right.
In their culture, it's often attributed to this supernatural being or the presence of an evil spirit. There's one village where they even go as far as to, like, they have like certain scriptures of the Bible that they like roll up into like a little, almost like a mini scroll, and they put it in this like little pouch that they all wear that they believe will ward off these spirits. And, you know, in this documentary, he's like interviewing these folks, you know, with the translator and all that. And they're talking about their experiences, and they're talking about how they'll just like wake up in the middle of the night and this, you know, this devil is in their room and is just trying to, like, you know, I don't know, control them. And then in the daytime, like, they can just feel its presence as if it's still there. That's why I call it the devil on your back. It's just strange.
And isn't there something about, like, I don't know if this is the culture that does that. It's like something about like riding something, like man, I don't know why I can't think of it. It's almost like the Old Hag, but it's like she's like riding you or something.
Maybe that's the one.
I know that sounds
Like that's not a nightmare. That's like a dream.
not
you know?
good at all, but
It's like Ray in Ghostbusters. What's going on with this belt, Dad? And it's just moving.
just cover your eyes.
You know, we talked briefly about the Mara in Iceland, for example. I mean, over and over in China, there's this thing they call the ghost depression. It's essentially sleep paralysis is attributed to ghosts sleeping on the sleeper's body, sitting on the sleeper's body. It's sort of like pretty parallel across, you know. Tyler mentioned earlier that this Swiss artist, Johann Heinrich Fuseli, who was the artist who painted The Nightmare, which depicts a woman in sleep paralysis with a demonic figure on her chest.
Yeah.
This was in 1781.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm talking about.
And coupled with the fact that it's global, and we're talking about small villages in Nigeria and all around the world that just, you know, they're not looking through, you know, the art book to kind of compare notes. You know what I mean? And when we get into this kind of stuff where it's just like it's happening everywhere, yes, of course, scientifically, we're all human. So some of those, you know, physiological and psychological properties that would cause something like this, I get it, man. You know, of course, we're going to have that in our human population. But once you start talking about the things that they're seeing and them being like similar, it gets weird. Now, before we kind of dive into any stories or specific accounts, I do want to talk about something that is super interesting. I've been waiting, like, I swear, a year to talk about this. I didn't even think we were going to, and I'm just jamming it in.
We'll return after these messages.
It's a pretty cool place if you're a Martian.
Or a vampire.
You think you really know what's happening around here, don't you?
Is anyone out there?
We're fighters for truth, justice,
in the American way.
Hey, this is Woody.
And this is Tyler, and you're listening to That Would Be Rad.
And now back to our show. In the 1980s, there was a series of mysterious deaths among some refugees in the United States who came from Laos, and they were called Hmong refugees. Young, healthy men were dying in their sleep.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
And this phenomenon was referred to sudden, unexplained nocturnal death syndrome, or SUNDS, all right, S-U-N-D-S.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the Hmong people believed that these deaths were caused by a nocturnal spirit known as the Dab Sog, who sat on the chests of sleepers and suffocated them. Of course, this belief aligns with the classic sleep paralysis experience, man, that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Dude, it was so prevalent for a time that researchers and scientists explored all the different medical explanations, including genetic factors, stress-related issues due to the trauma. Now, a lot of these, post-Vietnam, a lot of these refugees came to the U.S. to live the American dream and all this. And so there was that sort of potential post-war trauma and being relocated and culture shock and all this stuff. But to this day, no definitive cause was ever found, and the deaths were officially attributed to this sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome. Now, something else that's interesting. The way I even found out about that was watching a documentary about A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Which is really good.
It's so good.
Yeah. It's really long, too.
Wes Craven talks about this article that was in the LA Times, and it talked about a young refugee from the Cambodian genocide who was too afraid to sleep for fear of being attacked in his dreams and dying before he awoke. As soon as he nodded off, his parents assumed the situation had stabilized. Then they heard screams in the middle of the night, and they found him after it was too late. He had already passed away.
I mean, what were they saying cause of death was? I'm sure the coroner report would have to.
Yeah, I mean, they're hard to stop, dude.
Wow.
And also there was no clear cause of death. Some locals and stuff and people within it blamed chemical nerve agents that were used in Vietnam War, and maybe those refugees had been kind of exposed to.
So you think it was a retroactive thing?
Maybe that was a theory. I don't think that. That's just a theory because really that's not really how nerve gas works.
Right.
But, and there wasn't really any evidence of that.
Well, they do say Agent Orange, after, if you were exposed to that, years later, you could have, sort of.
Yeah, there were residual effects, but it wasn't this.
Yeah.
Some people talked about how, and I think this is where you were talking about that chemical or whatever, mutations in the gene SCN5A, which regulates the entry of sodium ions in cardiac cells. They're an underlying cause of what's called Brugada syndrome. And that's when you're it regulates, your heartbeats. And I mean, dude, it's so fascinating how much of our physiology is electric.
Yeah.
And how just one little sort of change to that current can just mess it all up. And that's because we live in a simulation. New song.
I like it.
Called That's Because We Live in a Simulation.
I mean, I do think there is something to that. I mean, I think it's kind of brushed aside so often because we immediately associate it to the Matrix, because that's sort of the, I don't know. I mean, it is probably the best sort of example of it, because you can kind of understand it, even whether you're a person who's into this stuff or not. But I do think that I think even biblically, it's kind of talking about in this weird sort of roundabout way. It's our life. It's but a vapor. It's there's a veil. It's I don't know. It does seem like we're in this sort of controlled little ant farm in a way.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to some real life encounters. we've kind of put together some pretty kind of chilling stories from listeners who've sent them in, and others that we kind of found. But I'm going to kick it off real quick with a comment on our Instagram. And this Instagram user said, "I used to get night terrors so bad. And for the first few, I definitely saw tall, lanky shadow men circling my bed. No hats, though. And that fear, the effing fear you feel, I'll never forget that. How much you want to scream and you cannot. It's pure hell. It was during a weird time. I was staying in a guest bedroom of a friend's house, working a very tiring job. At first, I seriously thought the room I was staying in was haunted. Whew. I mean, that's scary, man.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do? You're going to be like, hey, bro, I appreciate you, letting me stay here. But turns out I think your room's haunted. So I'm actually going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Although, boy, it's kind of, now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of a good, you kind of get a built-in way out if you're like, hey, bro, sorry, man. I know it's getting late, but your room's haunted. Gotta go.
It's not you. It's the shadow people.
Yeah, yeah. Anybody looking up, any younger audience looking for good ways to break up with your significant other there, it's not you. It's the shadow people in your house.
Right. So I found this little breakdown on Reddit by someone, and I think it's really interesting. I think he says some things here with like almost a little too much certainty in a way, but I do think it's really interesting, his take on this. Are you cool if I read that?
Yeah, man, please do.
So it says, do you see shadow people? What are they? Can you explain them? Normal, everyday shadows are created when an object interrupts the natural flow of light from its source, resulting in a projection upon a surface. When the light source is limited, the result can be a complex network of shadows in many shapes. Dark men, shadow spirits, or shadow people, as you call them, are not exactly shadows. They are more like leaky spirits that have caused a ripple in our realm. However, the principles that govern light can be used to understand why and how we see them. The spirit realm and our Midgard realm, the realm between the higher and lower planes, do not ordinarily mix. Even though there are spirits all around us that we are ordinarily not aware of, we do not see them left and right because of the natural laws that govern our universe, which we've talked about that. Maybe both realms will spill into each other someday when the gates are broken, but not today. In order to witness a shadow spirit under normal circumstances, a person must already be psychically attuned to the spirit realm. Some people are born with this talent, but most spend a lifetime acquiring the skill. There are circumstances, however, that make it more likely and possible for anyone to see a shadow spirit. During the thin spaces between sleep and waking, psychics, mystics, and true mediums have the ability to enter this thin space at will. This is what gives them the power to witness spirits on demand. Most psychics, mystics, and mediums are frauds, which we've also said. There are very few people with genuine skill to interact with the spirit realm. People that have the ability acquire it in one of three ways. One, they train their whole lives to do so, open their minds to the spirit realm. Two, they were born into a lineage with a predisposition toward the talent. And three, they have made a deal with a spirit. Often the currency used is the medium's actual soul, which that's pretty fascinating. It's kind of like a warlock in D&D. Witnessing a shadow man or shadow spirit can be quite jarring, both emotionally and psychologically. Witnesses are forced to make a decision about the existence of spirits and to either believe or explain away their experience as a nightmare, a fluke, or even as madness. Be careful not to be too curious about spirits. You may just find yourself opening your mind up to a realm that you're just not ready for. I just thought that was kind of...
It is cool, especially like the sort of explanation of what a shadow is.
Yeah, that's
in terms of,
like leaky spirit or whatever. So it's almost like it's whatever that frequency of it is like sort of spilling over into our existence. So this is another one that I found on Reddit that says shadow people are just messing with you. They're demons though, and they need to be gone. I saw one every night at 1 o'clock, And I would wake up and look out my bedroom door, and he was sitting on my couch staring at me. Let me just stop right there. That's terrifying.
Yep. I mean,
not even in your bedroom, but you get up, you walk out, you look. I mean, I'm just sort of picturing my house. You look over sort of the little Juliet balcony, and down on your couch below is just a shadow character that looks up at you.
And then right when he looks up, a key falls from the ceiling.
I mean, you never know. I took some Crisco.
Oh, man. I cannot wait to see how this ends.
I took some Crisco oil and prayed to God to bless the oil with me. I then dipped my finger in it and talked and said the Lord's Prayer as I went through my house and touched every door or window that went directly outside. No inner doors or windows. The next night I woke up at 1 a.m. and he wasn't on the couch. But the moon was very bright that night, and as I looked into the living room, I saw him outside walking past my small windows in my front door just to show me that he was still around. Mm-hmm. The next day, I blessed the property lines in my yard, saying the Lord's Prayer and asking God to make him go away, and I never saw him again after that.
2 ways I know this lady's Southern.
Oh,
one,
Crisco.
Number one, Crisco.
Yeah.
That's it. Number two, that's what she used to bless the house.
Yeah. Well, although, I mean, that is a biblical thing, like,
no, I know
anointing
that,
with
I'm just saying,
oil and stuff.
Right, anointing with oil, but then
Crisco.
Coming down south, she's like, well, I was saving this for the chicken tomorrow, but we'll do it.
Yeah.
Another quick common thing, again, that I've sort of seen with regard to sleep paralysis and all of that, for those of you listening, they're like, if I'm ever like stuck in this, if I'm feeling this, before you go and get that, I don't know what it is, tube of Crisco and all that. Mm-hmm. One thing that I did see that was kind of multiple people when they talked about this and how much anxiety it gives them and how they can just get in that vicious cycle of just like not sleeping because they're scared to even try because they know they're going to wake up and feel this weight on their chest and all that. They would just, start praying. They would, do the whole like, get thee behind me, Satan kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, because there was one in particular, there's this priest up in New York City, up from where we are. So this is Father Pat Malone is in East Village, New York City. He actually witnessed, well, let me back up. There's this kid in this documentary. I say kid. He's probably like early 20s or something. He experiences, starting when he was like, 11 or 12, he started to see, these shadow people visiting him. He started feeling sleep paralysis. It would just mess with him constantly, messed with his, interpersonal relationships and everything. Finally, he, goes to school. He can't really keep a good job because he arrives,
just exhausted,
late, or he's just like half asleep all the time. And so eventually can't even, in fact, I think he was like engaged, man, and that messed with his relationship. And eventually, rather than be homeless, he goes and stays in this like hostel that's in the East Village. Now, does he listen to the Strokes? I don't know.
Ooh.
But
is he friends with Gordon Raphael?
He's in the East Village, so here we go. The father of this Catholic hostel is a guy named Father Pat Malone, okay? And just in quintessential sort of like stereotypical accent, he sounds Irish as it comes when they're interviewing this guy. And he says that he's actually, because part of the thing is, and we haven't really talked about this much yet, but there are these occurrences when these entities or these experiences become violent. Oh. And so this father kind of like refers to them as attacks. And he says that he's actually witnessed these attacks while that kid was living there. One night, apparently, he heard this guy screaming, and so he walks in there, and this kid's just, moving around in the bed, just twisting back and forth, and he's just screaming at the top of his lungs. He finally wakes him up, and he had like a scratch or something.
I mean, that sounds...
Yeah. And so they just prayed like crazy. They had someone come in. They performed sort of like
an exorcism almost?
It was kind of like an exorcism. I forget what he called it. It was something different, but it was just like, it's kind of like an exorcism. And after that, it just stopped happening.
Wow. So speaking of priests, this actually features one, and I thought this was just kind of fascinating. So this person says, When I was a boy, I used to see shadow people all the time, all caps, in the home I grew up in. It wasn't even peripheral motion detection. They would appear in my direct line of sight whenever I'd turn my head somewhere or enter a room, and they would quietly dart behind a wall or table as soon as I would look in their direction. They would always disappear within milliseconds. There was never any sound associated with him, just the distinct silhouette of a person shaped, blacker than black void in space-time that would never let me get a good look at it. Even then, I was convinced it was all in my head and told nobody. Then, one day, I tried playing a simple scare prank on my little sister. Hide behind a wall and spook her. Nothing fancy. But she caught me trying to hide, and the setup to my prank spooked my sister more than the prank itself. She then told me that she thought I was one of the strange shadow people she had been seeing.
Good
Yeah.
Lord.
Just to reiterate, I had told nobody, all caps, about what I had seen. It wasn't until a priest came over and blessed the entire apartment with holy water that they stopped appearing to either of us. It's been roughly 20 years, and I haven't seen them since. That's pretty scary.
Man.
There is, it's like that, which I think this is like a Bigfoot thing, like the hide behind character. I feel like we've covered it. Maybe like creatures of like the lumber woods or the lumber creatures, that one. But there is something so scary about like that, seeing something like kind of like peek around like a tree, or it's just, it never fails.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So I think this one actually does tie into what I was asking before about that feeling or that presence during sleep paralysis, where you just, it's like, at least for me, it was like I didn't really see anything at all, but you hear the humming, and then but you do feel like there's just something sort of just outside of you that's like in the room with you. So this person says, I'm not really sure if it was sleep paralysis or something else, but this happened to one of my male friends who's staying alone in his dorm room at the moment. What I'm going to share now makes it even scarier for me because I've heard that their hostel is kind of haunted too, especially the girls' hostel, like knocking at their door at midnight and finding no one at the door and a lot of other things. I never thought that the boys' hostel would be haunted too. Cutting to the chase, so it was just last night when he told me about the incident. It happened to him yesterday at around 3 in the early morning when he was half asleep with one hand on his forehead and the other on the bed. He thought he felt a presence when he saw an unknown spirit holding his hand. The one on his forehead and sitting on the floor with its head down like it was sleeping by his side. He was unable to move or scream. He even took his Bible and placed it on his chest and prayed, but nothing worked. After some effort, he could move and quickly got up from his bed, still not scared by what had just happened, and went to the bathroom. When he came out, he just had this thought of looking under his bed for no reason and saw someone, probably a ghost, who was staring at him directly and saying gibberish. Jesus. From what he told me, he heard it say, "You can see me, you can see me." Like it was shocked to see that he was able to see him or her. This is when he realized it was not just sleep paralysis, but something else. Also, this wasn't the first time something weird happened to him. He once had to rush back home because she just goes into there's this other. Also, this wasn't the first time something weird happened to him. He once had to rush back home because of weakness, so his mother worried, went to an evangelist. There they were told that the room my friend was staying in had some kind of evil spirit that visits him every night, making him weak by drinking his blood. Oof. It was too much. Yeah, it was too much to take in for me and difficult to believe, but the stories I've heard from my other two cousins who stayed there with their roommate also experienced some paranormal activities, which made it a little easier to believe. I'm still not able to forget what he said, and it often haunts me at around 3 o'clock in the morning. This person is a terrible writer, but
yikes.
Yeah, still kind of interesting. I do like that idea of, it feels very horror movie-esque, where, he had this thing, he kind of thought it was like, associated with like a sleep paralysis situation. He gets up, turns on the light, goes to the bathroom, and then comes back. But before he goes to bed, he looks under the the bed, and then he sees something like looking at him.
I don't like that.
Yeah, that's pretty scary.
You know, we talked a little bit about sort of like the potential biblical connection. Now, one thing that I found, and kind of just to wrap it up, is it is believed that the first, quote, night Mara was none other than Lilith herself.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Those of you that don't know who that is the first disgruntled wife of Adam who was banished, and she essentially enacted revenge by crushing and assaulting men in their sleep.
Yep, and that's sort of a Gnostic, in the Gnostic tradition, I believe.
I think ultimately, man, like sleep paralysis is this fascinating intersection of science and the paranormal, which is right up my alley. And it's a reminder, of course, like our bodies, our minds, everything creates these experiences that will feel incredibly real and incredibly terrifying. And I think ultimately the one thing that we can take away from this is you got to go to bed early. You got to get a good night's sleep.
So
mad. Throwing the mic at me.
By the way, the funniest thing is while we've been talking, my cousin Colt, who I just talked about whenever we were talking about narcolepsy, he literally texted me and I just said, recording a podcast and just talked about you. You know, and I just said, no, we're talking about sleep paralysis, and brought up narcolepsy, and it reminded me of you. And he said, damn, it sucks. I almost have it under control these days, though. I reset my circadian clock and just started getting up at 4:30. Boom. Exactly what you said.
Yeah, go to bed early, get up early. You're productive. You know, you get your magic mind shot. You're good to go. Anyway, I have enjoyed diving a little bit deeper into sleep paralysis. Again, it's the details that I uncovered, the science behind it. I had no idea, you know, but I'm ready for next week, dude. When we can give them a little preview, can we talk about what we're going to talk about next week?
I mean, yeah, I think so.
I mean, we're going to dive deeper into the one, the only Hat Man next week, which,
yes,
man, I'm ready to, you know, it's just one of those things. You have to talk about Shadow Man in general. You got to talk about sleep paralysis so we can kind of get that out of the way. And now we can dive into the Hat Man, and it's going to be scary.
Yeah, and surprisingly, even though I've known about the Hat Man forever, there is something that I've discovered recently associated with the Hat Man that's kind of fascinating and also really injects a little I don't know, excitement, like fear into the topic. That's kind of wild.
Yeah, wow.
But if you've enjoyed this episode and you want more, head on over to the Rabbit Trail, our Patreon, where you can support the show in real time, and it helps us, you know, kind of keep this show on the tracks. And it really, it's probably the best possible way to show your support, and it means so much to me and Woody and the show that you guys are supporting us in that way. It's just, it's just beyond amazing, and we're still, you know, just so grateful for everyone that's over there. If you would like to get in touch with us, you can head on over to our Instagram. Just look up That Would Be Rad Podcast. Jump in the comment section, shoot us a DM. If you have your own story, shoot it over to thatwouldberadpod@gmail.com if it's more long form. Most importantly, if you would like to tell your own story, which is the kind of the thing that we would prefer, we would love to have you featured on a possible future episode. You can head on over to our website, thatwouldberadpodcast.com, and leave a voice memo. Your stories really do make our day, and you know, it's just cool to hear from you guys all across the globe. There's just like nothing cooler than that for us. Head on over to follow our link tree, go buy a shirt, go buy some merch. We have some new stuff on the way. We're not quite ready to give it away just yet, but it's something that we're like really excited about. Thank you so much for your 5-star reviews. If you haven't left one yet, please do. It really helps, you know, spread the show across the globe. And probably more so than anything else, go tell that weird friend about the show that you think would be into shadow men or ghost or simulation theory or Mandela effect, whatever. We all have that one friend, you know, maybe that's sort of roaming the parking lot of the local gas station. We know that he would love it. So go tell him about the show. I guess that's about it. You got anything else, Woody?
I think that's it, man.
Right on. Well, we love you. We appreciate you. And as always,
be rad.
That's the way it goes. The way it You're my favorite song on the radio that's only playing sad songs. Well, even sad songs have to come to an end. And you always said our future would be a parade of flowers, but I guess it died even before it began. And that's the way it goes. The way it goes. The way it goes. The way it You were all black clouds in a time where I just needed some sunshine. You were already dead before you became a ghost. You always said our future would be a parade of flowers, but now all that's left is a single rose. That's the way it goes. The way it goes. The way it goes. The way it
Access granted.
Into the next one, but just say it. This one.
Well, no. I was going to say, do you want to
My
do?
voice starting to sound. I'm like Robert F. Kennedy right now. Go ahead. God,
No,
I
I
hate
was.
you. No joke, man. It's really like Cheryl. There's a bomb in it.
I mean, no. I'm waiting to hear
It's coming.
just the association with like the president.
The president? I mean, he's definitely a shadow man.
And he's sleepwalking his way
Dude.
through life.
Like, I keep on asking people, I was like, man, have you guys seen the new Walking Dead episode? And they're like, what? I'm like, oh, dude, it was phenomenal. I stayed up late and watched it. And they're like, what? And I was like, really cool episode title. It's called Presidential Debate.
Jesus.
Okay.
Wow.
I'm your camp counselor, Woody Brown.
And Tyler Bence.
I said it weird, didn't I?
Oh, wait a minute. Are you
I should
supposed
say,
to
and this is your other counselor, right?
Yeah.
I feel like you do it way more than me because I feel so
Yeah.
out
I
of
do.
practice here. All right.
I do.
I'm your camp counselor, Woody Brown, and this is your... Wait. I'm your handsome camp counselor, Woody Brown, and this is your kind of goofy-looking camp counselor. There we go. Never been better. First take. One take wonder.
One take, Woody.
There we go.
Shh.